Hi, and welcome to Phantasmal Farce's Adventurise, where we delve into the world of entertainment and see if we can pull an adventure out of our arse. Our aim is to inspire and to show, so long as you look, almost anything can be a tabletop adventure. So don't be intimidated, and let's see what we can stitch together. I'm Allan, and I'm the forever GM Macastrix of a group of players in Wales. I love casting my 4th level arcane eye over stories and seeing how they translate into adventures. In this episode, we will be adventurising
Blood Mountain.
Blood Mountain is Mastodon's breakout album, released in 2006. The album marked a stylistic shift away from their sludgy beginnings to a more melodic future. However, their penchant for concept albums and prog concepts continued. The Blood Mountain story revolves around the titular Blood Mountain and an item known as the Crystal Skull. Troy Sanders, the bassist from the band, said it's all about climbing a mountain and the struggles that you face on the way.
Opinionize.
Hi Rod, how are we this evening? We are recording in an evening, regardless of what time anyone's listening. So how are you this evening?
I'm well, thank you. We've had a bit of some technical difficulties, but yeah, ready to crack on with our weekly schedule.
Yep, this is the first one. Oh no, second one, technically, I think. I don't know.
I suppose Archer came as week 1, although we announced it. It did come a week after Annihilation.
But yeah, so today we're talking about Blood Mountain by Mastodon. This is one I personally have been looking forward to. Blood Mountain was my introduction to Mastodon. I didn't really get into them when they were in their sludgier phase. I got into them in this, which is their breakout album. You could argue that when they sold out, but I think that would be very unfair to describe it that way. Basically, they brought in the more clean singing, the stronger sense of melody, in the guitar playing as well, though they always had that to a certain extent. And also, as well, The Wolf is Loose, the opening track that's one of my favorite opening tracks of an album of all time. The intro drum fill is you as soon as that comes in, you know that it's a song that's going to kick your ass and you're going to love every minute of it. So yeah, I know I've just kind of barreled into saying how much I like the album. It's quite it's an important album for me. I'd say it is. I don't really have any strong emotional attachment to it, but it definitely sits in my top 10 albums. So Rod, how are the mighty Mastodon? How does their Blood Mountain magnum opus tickle your taint?
I hope you can pick up the size, because there's no real way of saying this. I want to like this because I want you to like me liking this. I want you to like me, period. But Mastodon, man, it's not my jam. It's not my thing. I mean, I'm not a music snob. I tend to listen to a lot of different and varied things. Case in point, how dare you say that the Wolf is Loose is one of the best songs to open an album? That's you're talking out your ass, considering that Phil Collins' No Jacket Required has Susudio as its opening song.
I said one of.
Oh,
I would just. Am I going to have to put a disclaimer
what a
at the end? Am I going to have to put a disclaimer at the end saying the views you have heard about Phil Collins' Susudio do not represent Phantasmal Farce? They are the how do they do that?
I don't know. But we are recording this. I will listen back and I will try and pick out whether or not you said that. Just to, yeah. Because it just wasn't my thing. I mean, at first I thought this doesn't resonate with me, and I thought I was going to blame Mastodon because they've always been in my mind sort of a heavy rock. What did you call it? Sludge.
Generally, what they were referred to when they first kind of started out.
Yeah. I blame the band, but the more I listen to, because I did again, if I'm going to just tar the band with one album, when albums brush. I wanted to listen to other things. So like Leviathan and things like that, I wasn't overly keen on either. But their newer stuff, although Leviathan was 2016.
Leviathan is like 2003 or something.
Is there? Oh, I don't know. But yeah, the newer stuff I can get behind a little bit more. Because was Mastodon Curl of the Burl?
Curl of the Burl is from The Hunter, which is 2 albums later from Blood Mountain.
So things changed quite drastically since Blood Mountain then, in theory, because I don't mind the Curl of the Burl. It's a song that's stuck in my head several times.
But Blood Mountain is the turning point. It's the before Blood Mountain is more sludgy heavy. After Blood Mountain, they delve further into kind of melody, strange sounds, and just go into a kind of a more melodic, progressive thing. Blood Mountain is the album that has the most kind of bits of the old and the new kind of stitched together.
Okay.
But it is the turning point.
Point being is, yeah, I can't write off Mastodon entirely, because I do like the newer work rather than the old stuff. But yeah, this felt as though it felt like work. Not only was it hard work to get through it and listen to it, but it also felt like I had some sort of deadline to listen to this song by, or this album by, and it made it even more of a chore for me. I wasn't a fan.
Okay, so quite a divergence in opinion there, but hey, that's it's not necessarily going to be a problem, I don't think. Well, we'll see. But I've got plenty of ideas. I've
got a few, yeah, but I think looking from how we've discussed and notarized this, I think that well, my take on it will be different to yours, certainly. So that's good. It'll maybe hopefully give at least the one person I know listens to this some ideas as to what to do. Possibly that one person being me.
Let's move on to the next section.
Come on then.
Mechanize.
Okay, so like I said, this is one that I had a lot of ideas for. I've spoken in the other episodes about the pieces of media that inspired the idea for the Adventurise series. Blood Mountain is not one of those. However, Blood Mountain is, once we'd discussed the idea a little bit, Blood Mountain was the one that I first had ideas come to me that said this should be part of the series. So like I said, maybe we're gonna defer on this, but differ on this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got plenty of ideas. So though I'll start with my classic of where do the players go, and I think this one is possibly the easiest of any. I know I said that about something else I think we've recorded. Just a warning, I'm probably going to call... I think it's just a fact that whichever one we're recording is I either consider it the easiest one we've ever done or the hardest one we've ever done. And immediately, as soon as we go on to another one, I suddenly claim that one's the easiest or the hardest. But because it has pretty much a nameless, formless protagonist, the Wolf is Loose, they directly reference the idea of the hero with 1,000 faces, the monomyth, the call to action and refusal of the call, all that classic traditional kind of mythology storytelling beats it follows. So the fact that you have a character that is kind of formless and everything is more either abstract or about the mountain means you can put whoever you like. You can send whoever you like up Blood Mountain. Did you have any thoughts about player characters, or was that not something that kind of crossed your mind when you were listening to it or reading the lyrics?
The lyrics that I read actually also had little synopsis, so what are they called? Cliff notes or something. So it was actually sort of, not only could I read the lyrics, but I could also sort of see the meaning behind them, which helped. Doesn't mean that I took any notice, but I helped. I think it was deliberately made so that, because it references the hero, as in, although it's third party, it could be anyone. You could make that first person and put you in that position. They could be singing about you. They could be singing about your character. You know, it's almost like a bardic tale in that sense. So there's no reason why the hero or the protagonist of the album can't be the character team group themselves. Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I got no dispute on that one.
Although it's recorded in third person, it is very... They do speak about the thoughts and feelings of the character, and so
I do kind of listen to it from a first-person perspective, even though that's not exactly how it's recorded. So if I refer to the hero as he, that's why, because I'm kind of in a strange way referring to my own thoughts. But yeah, he's scared, feeling kind of in Hunters of the Sky. He's running faster than he ever has, trying to dodge these creatures in the sky. And things like exerting yourself physically, being scared, are not character traits. They're something that anyone will have felt or done. And so everything about it is inherently relatable and easy to just plonk whoever you like.
Yeah, we've spoken before about hardcover adventures. So, your Dungeons and Dragons, Saltmarsh, or others. Nothing's coming to mind at the moment. Paizo have done 2 anniversary editions where they compiled the first 2 adventure arcs that they did, because they normally do them in sort of fortnightly pieces, don't they, or monthly, 2 monthly.
It's monthly. They did at certain points do it bi-monthly, as in every other month, but there was enough demand for them to shift it to monthly.
Yeah, but point being, they compiled those 2 into anniversary editions, whereby Curse of the Crimson Throne and Rise of the Rune Lords were also large, thick, A to B, start, middle, and end adventures, rather than small modules or the one-shots that we have discussed maybe in the past, such as Arch and so forth. So yeah, the entire thing does seem like one large epic adventure, certainly. My feelings on it all, though, is it's very sort of poetic. It requires, and metaphorical. It requires a bit of interpretation, almost to the level of as if you're reading Shakespeare. And I'm not keen on that. Never was in school. So maybe a lot of it was lost on me. There were certain things that had sort of jumped out at me, either by reading the lyrics or listening to the lyrics and so forth, is where that's where things sort of really came to me. Like, for example, when he mentions the belly of the beast or the belly of the whale, it sort of means, like, to me, my interpretation of that is that's, you mentioned the call to arms, whereby that's him, or the call to adventure, whereby that's him or her, they or she can go into the danger zone. So there was some interpretation was required, but there were certain parts that I sort of pulled from there that I sort of allows me to, if I was to put together an adventure, which is the aim of the podcast in the first place, these are the things that I would focus on. I mean, other people can go away and do their own, that's fine, or they can just take what we're giving them. But yeah, rather than interpreting it as an A to B sort of hard and fast choo-choo on the rails, I would be sort of trying to take little, extrapolate small snippets lyric here or a theme there. And like you say, yes, it seems as correct me if I'm wrong, but Mastodon seems to have done their homework on this one, and they've really sort of knuckled down on the hero of 1,000 faces, I believe you call it, Joseph Campbell's work.
Yes, it's it's very. I'm not going to act like I'm an expert. I know the title and the name of the guy who wrote it. I've never read it, but I'm familiar with like discussions around it. So yeah, I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want to give the impression that I'm an expert. But if the idea of the monomyth and the fact that there are so many stories that are related and follow this specific pattern, like for example, the big one that everyone talks about is Star Wars. Star Wars has the death of his aunt and uncle as the call to action. Yeah, you can read that, and it can all slot into place exactly. So
he crossed the threshold into the unknown. These are things that are mentioned in the hero's journey. He crosses the threshold into the unknown. There's a mentor/helper. They were challenges and trepidations or temptations.
Yeah.
And then there's the revelation in the abyss, death and rebirth.
Yeah. And I'm sure they probably have read it. But maybe it was the age I was into this album. I was about 18 when it came out. I didn't really find it very poetic or weird. Or say not weird is incorrect. I would never have in a million years kind of taken the Shakespeare angle, and also as well when I first was aware of the album, I didn't know anything about the hero with 1,000 faces. I just thought it was some badass.
Do you not see where I'm coming from, though? Howling eyes, dry, pale legs, howling on through fields and graves. Is that not? I mean, daylight, hide the skin, cut it off, scatter ash in the wind. Does that not require interpretation, or does that to you go, yeah, I get that straight away? Because to me, that was because from that. These are lyrics, by the way, that I'm reading from "The Wolf Is Loose." My interpretation of that was that because again, there's lots of mention towards the moon and things. It made me think that the hero was a werewolf.
Yeah, that is something you could think of. Again, it's not something I actively thought about. I knew the concept, and I've always things like that. Because also as well, the title, "The Wolf Is Loose," that made me think of. They quite often describe like when someone is a werewolf in like a show or a book. When they have the Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing going on, where it's almost like the werewolf is like a different creature that lives inside them. I've always thought the wolf is loose. Has always given me that
as in
feeling.
The hero
of
being born from the, again, going back to Star Wars, the Jedi being released from the humble moisture farmer.
Yeah, but but I also the kind of werewolf thing you picked up on, it kind of just fed into that. And I've always just had lots of ideas about it. I've never really looked into it, which is quite interesting in the ways that we're approaching it, because I'm approaching it as someone who's quite a big fan of the work in question, and obviously, consumed it or listened to it. So at that age, I just kind of used it more as I just listened to those lyrics and just, rather than thinking about kind of holistic meaning, just kind of, so I kind of just looked at it as separate ideas. I knew it was about climbing this mountain and challenges, and you're right, they are loose, because I always made my own interpretations of them, and I'd never really tried to pin them down. I just kind of, because I knew what the concept was, I just kind of let my mind think about what it was, but I might think about it slightly differently each time I listen to it.
Okay. So based from that, there's two different approaches to how we would adventurize this. And there's two interpretations of each song. So, shall we get into the meat and the bones of it now, then, and explain to people how we would break down each song, or what's your method? What's your process?
I have not done it on a song by song basis at all. I have taken the whole and taken the ideas I want to take from it as a piece as a whole.
Okay.
I haven't done an analysis of every song. We've mentioned The Wolf is Loose a lot. That's basically just because it's the first song, and it's also the one that mentions the hero's journey. So I made sure that I was going to mention that one. But yes, no, I didn't think of it as the individual songs. I just thought of the overall concept of the mountain and all the things it made me think. Because what I would be doing with it, you say about what kind of product would I be making? I envision it as something like Deathfrost Doom, Fever Swamp, or Slumbering Ursine Dunes, where it's a point of interest that you can kind of plonk in a sandbox. Because, as I say in the intro, the Blood Mountain, the reason that they climb Blood Mountain is because of this crystal skull that can unlock the next level of evolution, which could be magical, could be technology, could be if your players are into hiding in fridges from nuclear explosions, it could be aliens.
I believe what specifically the reason why you've come to the conclusion, or why everyone believes that it unlocks the next level of evolution, is because what's the specific word? Something about a lizard brain. I believe that's what.
Yes, the reptilian
brain. That's right. That's specifically what Mastodon have put in to allude to that. They haven't specifically said in the songs that this is going to unlock the next level of evolution. They've said it's going to. I can't remember specifically what the line is, but yes, they allude to the reptilian brain, which is, you're treading David Icke Walker there, but that's my interpretation of it.
Reptilian brain is a little bit more credible than David Icke's. What's the word? David Icke's reptile people. Yeah, so I would keep the skull. So basically, I wouldn't be. This for me is, it wouldn't be, a story of love and loss or revenge or anything. This would be a game where it's all about player greed, effectively. As in, there's this thing at the top of a mountain that makes you really powerful. Do you want to go get it? So that's why I would have it as something you can slot into a sandbox world where there's options. So do you go to the city and sort one out, or do you go to this big mountain of which the locals say there is some epic treasure at the top that will change your life forever? So that's how I would run it.
So Blood Mountain would just be alluded to as a dark and dangerous place, much like the Forgotten Realms Underdark, for example, or the Thessalonian ruins beneath that city with that what name I've forgotten. Yes.
Sandpoint. But yeah, obviously if you're doing it on a one shot or a short campaign, you can just start at the foot of the mountain with characters that have already decided to climb it. But yes, I would be viewing this as a point of interest that so I'm talking not pamphlet, not big hardcover adventure. I'm talking quite popular in the kind of indie scene, the kind of 6x9, 100-ish page stuff.
So you say that you want to keep the crystal skull then? Am I right in saying that? Yeah.
Yes.
How would you introduce the MacGuffin then?
Yes, well, like I said, it would be something of, well, if you start the game at the foot of the mountain, that would just be part of the game's assumption. Basically, if you were starting at the mountain, you'd go, hey guys, do you want to play a game where you climb a super dangerous mountain and get superpowers at the end? People would either go yes or they'd go no. if you wanted to plonk it in a sandbox world, it would just have to be filtered in through rumors. Well, again, there's many ways you can do that. If you're plonking it into a sandbox world, you deal with it the same way that you deal with anything you plonk into a sandbox world. People close to it might have local folklore about it that you can drip out to the players if you want to do that. However, if you want to really goad them towards it, just have someone who's like, think kind of a bit Indiana Jonesy. I do realize that the fact I made that Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull theme has probably put Indiana Jones on my brain, and so all the kind of cultural references I'm using are incredibly timely because it's Indiana Jones that only came out like 5 years ago, right? Indiana Jones he gets because again Indiana Jones is a bit of a blank slate protagonist. I know he's got the quirks and everything, but he generally, someone comes along and say, hey, there's this super important item, you should go get it before someone else does, and he goes off and gets it. So you could have that as well. You could have an NPC come along and hire them, implore them that it's important.
Could it be given as quest loot from a previous? So, for example, you've done a dungeon crawl. There was a shrine, and this one thing was sat atop the shrine. Amongst all the other jewels and gold that you may give them. Would you have that, and then maybe they do they cast detect magic on it, or they take it to be evaluated, or it gives them all strange lucid and connected dreams, sort of like Inception type thing, where they're all maybe in the same dream together, or would that be something that you could maybe do as well?
So you mean a piece of treasure that tells them
maybe over time? Yeah, maybe you can let that sit in their sack, or bag of holding, or on the back of the mule, whatever the case is for the team, the group. But again, slowly drip feed it. Have it sort of have it not so much corrupt, but entice them. Have it whisper to them and make them encourage them.
I had not thought of the Crystal Skull as something that calls out to people, but that is a perfectly valid way to bring people in. It's not what I thought. So to answer your question, did I think of that? No, but I think your question of did I think of that was more of a I've got this good idea, but for some reason you didn't want to claim it as an idea. You wanted to phrase it as a question.
Today is going to be listened back with a fine-tooth comb. I could have swore I said, would you? I don't know. Anyway, irrelevant. This Blood Mountain is turning, is sundering the team.
Yeah, you said would you, and the answer is honestly, until you'd mentioned it, no, I would not, because it wasn't something I thought of. So you could have just said, I have a cool idea.
He's because I'm just, it just sort of, I don't want to give ideas out there that people have to do it this way. It's just if you think of a good idea and you like it, and if you run it by a colleague or a friend or, a colleague, I suppose, in this setting, who says that they like it, then go with that one. It could be that they come across it. Maybe it was in the foundations of the house that they were living in, or it was under a pillow, some previous occupant of the inn. And it's like in the Lost and Found. You don't know. Yeah.
Although you could take the Crystal Skull as a magic item on its own, I would be, in the context of adventurizing Blood Mountain, I would only ever be looking to use it as the thing at the top of the mountain. I wouldn't want it to have left the mountain previously, but you could argue that would be an adventure that you could take all the mythology of the Crystal Skull and someone has already gone and taken it.
My understanding was the skull was in the hero's possession, who naturally, I believe, starts the adventure at the bottom of the mountain. And his task is to actually take the skull and himself, therefore, to the top of the mountain. That was my interpretation of it. I didn't. It wasn't in my mind that the skull is, because I just, from the way I see it, is the skull has to be placed on a plinth of some sort to activate this next step of evolution. So am I wrong in thinking that the skull is on one plinth and no less than 3 foot next to it is the plinth it needs to be on? Is that how you've seen it then?
I always saw it as that Crystal Skull was on the mountain, and looking at in some of the descriptions and also as well the lyrics, like you were saying, I think it's pretty clear that it wasn't really what's the word? It isn't very clear how he got hold of the skull, because you are right. He needs to put it at the top. He needs to put it at the top of the mountain. But I always saw it as something that was on the mountain.
So he finds it halfway
just needed
up.
to be. Yeah, I'd always seen the Crystal Skull as something that was on the mountain, but you didn't just get it and then get the superpowers. You had to get it and take it to this to the top of the mountain. But I do realize that's a bit confused, because I just saying that I thought it would be at the top of the mountain, but that is kind of how I envision it. That the Crystal Skull is. But yeah, you could split it in two. Because you could have the quest for the skull, and then the quest to put it up. But I was thinking that it would all be self-contained in the mountain. It's a little bit of, because obviously when we do this, we can't do it because we're changing it from one form of media to another. As part of the adventurizing process, I would shrink it down so that basically everything happens on the mountain. I wouldn't have the request for the skull, but I also quite like the idea that you would use that. It's just that's
I think
not how
we
I
can
thought
both
of it.
agree on the fact that the Crystal Skull is there, and it is a driving force. And it all depends on the game that you're playing. If it is a sandbox game and you're already 2 years deep, for example, in be it real world time or game time, the last thing you want to do is go, I've heard this cool podcast. I'm now going to suddenly take everyone, supplant them off and do something else. And we're going to change the game entirely. So you can include it, because I like that idea from yourself. I envisioned it much the same as how we have with the other episodes, is that we are just making almost a standalone campaign or one shot. But this is almost akin to, dare I say it, Vornheim, where you pick up the book, and Vornheim could be anything to anyone at any given time within that setting or within your campaign. You don't have to specify, right, we're on page 1, today is where we're going to actually start this campaign. So I like that idea. So you can, but yeah, my point there is being, in a roundabout way, the Crystal Skull, to us, at least for me anyway, I think you'd agree, is the catalyst. Be it found, be it rumor, whatever it is, the Crystal Skull is the call to adventure, is what's caused someone to now want to climb Blood Mountain and put themselves in harm's way, basically.
There are two kind of bits that three bits really, but one I don't have a lot of elaboration on. There are 3 bits that I would kind of directly lift, I think, which are the Sasquatch, the Birchmen, and the Hunters of the Sky creatures. I'll start with the Hunters of the Sky creatures. I just like the idea of, because they're described in the song Hunters of the Sky, and they're just flying reptile things that basically hound the protagonist. But there's the line evading sharks of the sky, and I know it's not particularly original, but I would have them as kind of flying bullets, or basically it mentions sky sharks, Rods, and I want there to be sky sharks. So I'm going to take them at their word when they called them sharks of the sky, and I would have, instead of the kind of air-based predator of the mountain, would be these flying shark creatures with kind of bladed wings.
Yeah, I would actually take it quite literal. I was going to say leathery wings, but that's almost specifically what they say. It's leather wings, bones hollow. So, but to clarify, when you say bullets, you mean the land sharks in air quotes there from the D&D game, as in
Yes,
the sort of
yes, I do.
They're almost armadillo-like, really, or pangolin. Those cheeky little chappies, but naturally fierce and antagonistic. I did a little bit of research on this just to see what specifically there is out there, and apparently, be it a meme or something, but Sharks at the Sky is an Urban Dictionary thing, so let's take it with a pinch of salt. But it was once mentioned on a stream that hummingbirds are the sharks of the sky, because sharks need to continue motion in order to breathe. Not necessarily, we can argue all day about the actual facts of the matter, but that's the myth anyway. Whereas they say the same about hummingbirds, that their wings are always beating in order to keep aloft. So I'd just like to see, I think you'd be interesting, depending on how you're going to go, if you're going to have a bit of a laugh and a joke about it. On one hand, if you're going to be serious, yes, have flying sharks or some sort of air-based bullets. On the other hand, you could have enormous hummingbirds causing grief, or some sort of maybe undead where they've, for example, as if they've got mange, or the feathers are falling off, and it's almost a husk of itself, and quite. You can dramatize it as much as you want, really. You can ham it up, but that's what I took away from it with my research, is maybe the hummingbird side of things. But because bullets are one of my favorite creatures of all time, I'm gonna kick the hummingbird to the corner, and I'll take yours 100% time of the time.
Also, as well, it is a bit strange. Strange. I find it funny that you basically, because of the context, you said if you want to be serious, you can go for flying sharks. I don't think flying sharks are the serious option in a lot of situations. But I do get you on board that they are kind of more serious than giant hummingbirds. But I do like giant hummingbirds, and again, I didn't think of any of that. So
that's only because, unlike you, I've not sort of I don't listen to it as music. So I've sat down and I've delved a little deeper and sort of scratched maybe a little bit more of the surface to specific lines and lyrics, as opposed to the enjoyment.
Because the second thing I would lift directly, and I do realize I'm using lift directly in a little bit of a loose term, is the Sasquatch, which, according to Troy Sanders, the bassist, is a psychic Sasquatch.
One-eyed psychic Sasquatch.
Yeah. And because I like, basically, that's an interesting little kind of mashup. They've got their Cyclops, psychic, and Sasquatch. And I like the idea of that being kind of something they can find, someone who can make some sort of sense of the mountain for them. However, it is a unique challenge that I don't think I have the answer for, is how do you deal with psychics in a game where you cannot know the outcome?
Because they can see the future, you mean?
Yes, and so
they're doing the Doctor Strange cross-legged checking 4 billion different outcomes to find the best one for them. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and basically, so you either have to be incredibly vague so that absolutely anything that happens, he was right, because he said, you either have to be like the guy who writes horoscopes for the newspaper, or it then turns into a railroad. Because if he goes like, you will die by fire, then you kind of have to avoid them dying by any other means, or if you don't, he wasn't really psychic. So psychics in games are a tough thing, and just because I've recently read it, I do like the idea of the Stars Without Number psychics, where the more specific they are, the less likely it is to be true, even though they can see it. Basically, the things they can see most clearly are actually the least likely to happen, because the theory in Stars Without Number is that anything they can see clearly means that someone can clearly see the way to stop it. So it's only vague things where people can't work them out properly that actually come true.
Yeah, and harkening back to Doctor Strange, there's nothing wrong with them seeing only one of the futures. Because what's to say if you tripped on a stone that it wasn't because you started with your left foot as opposed to your right foot forward? So what's to say that you didn't trip on that stone because you did the one thing that he didn't see happening? You know, that it's not the thing that he followed to its natural. So yeah, I would say that that's not really a problem. There was a lot in Circle of the Sasquatch. I'm thankful that you pointed that out to me, because I always had a Sasquatch, so which is a different thing altogether. Yeah, again, reading into the lyrics specifically, to me, lots of things were coming to it. Lots and lots of things. I was getting a very strong Ray Harryhausen, Jason and the Argonauts, because the chorus is Caesar of the Fleece, and Jason was trying to seek a golden fleece.
Yeah.
And there was a Cyclops, correct me if I'm wrong. I know that there was a great big iron golem situation. I can't remember what it's called exactly now. It was a Talos or something, wasn't it? I don't know. It's been a while. But
I get what you're on about, yeah.
No, that's right. There was one. No, I'm thinking of Odysseus. Never mind. Right. Point is, on track. Yeah, so I was getting strong Jason and the Argonauts vibes. Speaking of Odysseus, this is what came to mind then, is that Odysseus, with there being a Cyclops, he blinded the Cyclops, and then they just snuck past at night. Because the Cyclops is, you know, if he can't see, what's to say that he can't predict the future in the first place? So why not introduce him as blind? Is he an antagonist or protagonist? I mean, he seemed like what's the difference? Antagonist is the good guy's antagonist, yeah. So he seemed like an antagonist, but what's to say that he has to be? There's also mention in the song of Rakasha. Am I saying that right? Rakshasa?
Yeah, the tiger people. Yeah.
Well, that is to a D&D crowd, yes. But in the Hindu, Buddhist, and Jainism?
Oh, yeah.
They're demons, aren't they? I believe they're man-eaters specifically. So
yes,
is that what they're saying? Is that the Sasquatch is the Rakshasa?
I've always viewed him as neutral, as some sort of guide. That was my interpretation. I've always thought, and I don't know. I would keep him as vaguely antagonistic, vaguely helpful. Make it so that it's not entirely clear. I'd like to keep that line vague.
And then it goes on then to say that there's eyes all around, as if to suggest that there's maybe more than one. And then you enter the labyrinth, which again is the whole Grecian. There's a Minotaur at the middle. Who was that? Wasn't Achilles? Who was that? So yeah, there's that angle as well. I mean, is the labyrinth it's referring to Blood Mountain itself? So there's a lot.
That is how I interpreted it. That the labyrinth was the mountain, or maybe not even so much the mountain, but the struggle of climbing on it. I always thought the labyrinth was meant to be highly metaphorical.
I think you could take it a little bit literally, in the sense of what's to say, given that we're not actually doing the song or the album itself word for word, what's to say that where you deposit or where you have to take the crystal skull to is not at the center of a labyrinth? Why not have the final act of your adventure be a labyrinth? Why not make it challenging? at the very last.
Now you've got me thinking, is that at the top of the mountain is just a hole, and there's actually a labyrinth, and you have to get to the middle of the labyrinth, put it on the plinth, and basically the light from the, basically like a single focused point of light from the
Back to Indiana Jones again, yeah.
Yeah. From the top of the mountain. So getting to the top of the mountain is actually a red herring. You have to get into the labyrinth in the mountain. Yeah, I like that.
So yeah, there's also then, following on from that, the Birchmen. So you think that the Sasquatch is just a guy or gal who happens to live on the mountain and is more of a random encounter, although it's planned. It's more in the sense of a random encounter, in that he is not specifically an obstacle in the way. He's just something that can be used to break up the drudgery of climbing a mountain.
Because also as well, you mentioned the Birchman. One of the reasons I always viewed him as less antagonistic is that the lyrics do mention "Beware the Birchman," and I assumed that was, rather than the Sasquatch having to beware them, I assumed that was a warning given by the Sasquatch to the protagonist.
Listening to the album, what follows Circle of the Sasquatch is effectively an instrumental song. Track 6 is called Blade Catcher. Is this a point where you would do just spending time climbing higher and higher and higher? Doing general sort of, maybe there's a knoll encampment that'll harass you along the way, couple of sessions of climbing, couple of sessions of having to camp down. Again, maybe bandits try and stop you. Maybe there's a cult following you up trying to stop you from, or not so much a cult, but maybe there's a specific religious sect who do not want or need the evolution of humanity to progress. Which actually, off the top of my head now, raises the next question. Is it only specifically you that benefits from the Crystal Skull's next step?
That was a key kind of thing I wanted to raise, is with the Crystal Skull, how world-breaking should it be? As in, what is the next step of evolution? And like you say, can it be... is it for a single player? Can only one character get it? So that you then end up with a kind of story where at the end it turns tragic because everyone has to turn on each other. Or do everyone have it? And then when they do have it, you've got this kind of line. Is it... and now spoilers for the adventure Deathfrost Doom. Deathfrost Doom, which is a famous Lamentations of the Flame Princess adventure, famous for being... to a certain extent, is famous for being horrible and unfair. They argue it's unfair to call them unfair. But if you're interested, you can read it yourself and make your own mind up. But the thing that happens at the end of that is you unleash a unstoppable army of the undead into the world. So if you have Deathfrost Doom in your campaign world and the players go in, they essentially doom the world if they break in. This evil army comes out, and basically that fundamentally changes the world, because there's now a massive unstoppable horde of, or nigh unstoppable horde of zombies in the world that weren't there before the players got involved. So does the Crystal Skull, can the players continue to play after they've had the Crystal Skull, or do they become beings of such ascended knowledge that they couldn't ever be played by a person? They just kind of become a strange, kind of unknowable and mysterious NPC? Or do you go because what I'm saying is, if you quest for this Crystal Skull and you get there and it goes, you're on the next stage of evolution, +1 to intelligence, it's not that impressive. Where would you put it on that scale, from completely world and game changing to minor boon? Where would you see it fit?
Depends on how the game was going. specifically, if I was running it, given that I liked your idea of having it as just a thing, but also as part of, as in it's a point of interest, and including my idea of it being, say, maybe just a throwaway quest loot that they'd happen to have, or they've come across this crystal skull, and it's whispered to them slowly, and it's obviously it's their idea now. Then to that's how insidious it's been. I would make it that the crystal skull has told them that it's the next step of evolution, allowing, say, the more good-natured and selfless characters to try and do it for the betterment of humanity, or the more selfish side of characters to be able to do it to better themselves. But ultimately, the twist at the end is that the skull did it only for itself. The skull had its own plan in the background that led other people. So if this was just as a one-shot, there's nothing to say that this can't be from level 1 to 12. And depending on how you twist it, if you twist it, you could end it right there if you wanted to. Mission accomplished, thank you very much. Or there could be the world-changing thing, and now the levels 12 to 20, again, just using an analogy of Dungeons and Dragons, you could use whatever system suits you best. But why not then continue to put right what you put wrong? If you have it as a point of interest in a pre-existing campaign, have it change the world, that's fine. And then that gives you even more plot points. Do they ignore that? And do they sort of just whistle and walk the opposite direction and know nothing of it? Do they wipe their hands of it? Does it turn out that it only does them and they have got +1 to their intelligence and some sort of level of notoriety? You know, it depends on what sort of thing that you're running and how you want to reward that, or not, as the case may be. I like the twist at the end where it's not the pleasant outcome that everyone was expecting, to allow for the next step and to continue on. I prefer a campaign where it's you've played it for many, many, many years. You know, that there is no end in sight, that you know, even at level 20, there's still more things that you can do, and so forth, you know. What's to say then that you don't stop it there? That's brilliant. You've become too big for your boots, however, and in secret, you start a new campaign, same players, different characters, who then have to go off and bring down these people who are now suddenly too big for their boots.
Was exactly what my kind of last thought was going to be, is that, like you say, make it so that they become so powerful that they become the antagonists of the next campaign.
So we've had a little bit of a divergence from the point there. So yeah, track 6, Blade Catcher. That's sort of an interlude. Is it? That's what it's called? An
Instrumental.
Well, it's
call it an interlude. Yeah.
What's intermission then? That's the word I'm looking for. It's you sort of, you're breaking your story where the more mundane things can happen, where you have to set up a camp for the night, and where players and characters generally can take stock of their situation and sort of see how things are panning out.
Yeah, an intermission is when you buy ice cream and beer at the theatre. It's the bit in the middle.
I'd love an ice cream right now. Are you offering?
I can tell you what, I'll post you one.
Perfect. Okay. Following Blade Catcher is then Colony of Birchman, which I believe is a spin on the great Genesis, or Phil Collins. Genesis, isn't it? Phil Collins. Yeah.
Phil Collins was in Genesis, but it is Genesis they're riffing on.
And it's Colony of Leather Shoes or something. I can't remember now.
Colony of the Slipper Men.
That's what I said, yeah. But this one features Josh Homme.
Does, yes.
So yeah, these are the people you said you felt quite strongly, and they was sort of, let's say, more of 100% in your mind as to them being the antagonists, with the warning of beware them.
Yes, I would make it that they are the kind of native inhabitants of Blood Mountain. And so they have settlements and outposts all across the mountain. And I would have them, because they're Birchmen, presumably they're made of wood. They are like living trees. I would make them very antagonistic to humans and other humanoid races who presumably use trees to chop down and build or burn. So yeah, I would have them as a kind of a constant. They would be the main inhabitants of the mountain. They would not be friendly to humanoid races, because obviously, depending on what system you use, you might not necessarily be actually human, but in most cases you'll be humanoid. You'll be something that uses wood to build or burn.
And they've heard that on the, no pun intended, grapevine. And that's what's basically have them sort of harumph, get off my lawn, but then suddenly they spy in the corner of their eye that it's actually humanoids, these people who are taking their kin, their more sedentary kin from at the base of the mountain and around, i.e. just normal trees. That's what then leads them. So basically, it's not just because they're a creature to put in the character's way, it's because they have an active motivation to hunt and harangue, I suppose. So it doesn't have to be just once or twice or this one instance. They can crop up throughout as the different encampments and so forth, patrols are being encountered.
Yeah, and they would also then obviously be another way to bring. You said, like, how would you hook people to the mountain? Well, you go to this village and you go, look at that mountain over there that's covered in lush woodland. Why don't you chop the trees down there? And someone says, oh, you don't chop the trees down that. You don't chop the trees on that mountain because they chop you. You know, in Soviet Russia, tree chop you. So that would be another thing of, oh, let's go and look at the, you know, it's another intriguing mystery that someone might want to look at. And you could, especially if you're just plonking it down as a location in your existing sandbox, it's another way to get it mentioned. The fact that no one chops the trees down because allegedly the trees attack you. And I would have it so that no one has tried it in generations, so that no one can give you the exact information that you'd need to take them on. They just tell you it's dangerous.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from there. Yeah, I would take it a step further though, like I said, with my idea, but they're already aware. Although you could say don't chop the trees from on the mountain trees are already aware that other trees are not having a good time of it either. So they've always had this burning hatred, or slowly but surely festering inside them, that anything not mountain dwelling is a threat and needs to be punished. Would you then have them, should they ever encounter an encampment, what would they be built? Would it be human skin huts and yurts that they live in, or do they just survive the because they're trees effectively, is how I picture them as ents. So do they just root themselves and stay there and survive the elements?
That's how I envision them, yeah. However, if you wanted to go a bit more grimdark with it, yeah, you could do it that they live in kind of tents made of human skin. Well, from the foolish people who go up the mountain and no one ever comes down.
It just made me, it was a spin on, if we're making houses out of their skin, then the reverse would be the truth. I mean, I was going to say stones, but that's boring. Maybe there's a stone, because there is a sleeping giant in episode 2, song 2. So why not make it a stone giant? So would they make the houses out of stone? And then I just thought, well, flip it. They as a defiant sort of revenge act, they have now taken to using us as their building construction material.
You then could also have you could create a political dispute between them, because you could have the Birchmen who just want humans to stay off the mountain, and then the ones that want to kill them to wear their skin and humiliate them and are far more aggressive, as in they're all against humans, but you have the ones that just don't want to be chopped down and don't want their friends to be chopped down, and you have the ones that are like full of anger and a sense of need to have revenge on people. So yeah, but they would be the main, like in a lot of cases, a goblin is the main population of a dungeon. I would have the Birchman be the main population.
So, for argument's sake, if you are, if you draw the Blood Mountain on a 2D piece of paper, so effectively like a bell curve, up and then down the other side, and then you broke it down into almost sort of tiers or sort of levels, 0 or water level, sea level, to 1,000, it would be inhabited by gnolls. And then from X to Y would be inhabited by the Birchmen. Would you? I'm just asking this in a. It's a slow burn question. Where would you put the hunters in the sky? Would you put them like with Avatar? The biggest one never needs look up. So is he on top and they come down to hunt? And do they go for? Do these hunters in the sky have any need to attack things made of wood, or do they attack them because their houses are made of the thing that they like to eat?
Obviously, because I hadn't thought of the skin thing, I hadn't thought of that. But yes, I was thinking that it would be a thing of there would be some other types of wildlife, but I was thinking, and occasionally they would all live at the top of the mountain, and they would just occasionally kind of just fall and swoop, basically like seagulls at the beach. Yes, I wouldn't have thought that the Birchmen would need to worry about them. The Birchmen probably also don't like them, because I imagine that they probably don't like, because they probably do cause. I would imagine they probably cause just some incidental damage to the trees and stuff. So I imagine they wouldn't like them, but I wouldn't see them as in direct competition.
I'm just trying to place it as to, for example, if I was to run the game, where I would include them, because although the hunters in the sky come later on in the album, maybe people would rather have them further down. But in my opinion, thankfully, it matches your own. I would include them further up as well, because the eagles tend to live higher up the mountain and hunt further down it.
So, for something that you claimed not to enjoy, we've had an awfully long discussion on this, and I'm quite mindful of the time, because I'm sure everyone would want to listen to us for 2-3 hours, but I think we do need to have maybe shave a little bit off that time. So I think we're in the kind of the anything else section of Mechanize. So we've discussed a lot. Any kind of quick lightning round things that you wanted to mention that we didn't get round to?
I was going to say join us in part 2, but okay.
Oh, we can always come back. We can always come back for a part 2, but that does mean we have to finish this one.
Quick fire lightning round. Things to include: the crystal skull. How you would include that, and how you would have it influence the party to action is entirely up to yourself. The climb of the mountain is pretty straightforward. Pick any old mountain and make it as difficult as you want. Everest has its own challenges. A will get thinner. Snow will inevitably fall. Have them encounter 3 things, pretty much in that order as they come in the song, really. The Sasquatch, the Birchmen, the Hunters in the Sky. Well, as opposed to have them in that, their habitat be in that order, I should say, rather. Obviously, things can move up and down the mountain as they please. But have them, I would say, their habitat be in that order. What do you do with the crystal skull when you get to it? Again, that's going to be entirely up to yourself as well. We've discussed having it at the center of a labyrinth. Is it just going to be an old rock cane that you put on top? Also consider then what the consequences of that will be. Ultimately, we can show you the door. It's up to you to walk through it, dear listeners. Is there anything that you would like to add? Is there any points that I've missed?
No, I think that pretty much. Well, it's covered everything. I think we can without kicking off another kind of 45 minutes. maybe we will revisit this. But I think I'm happy with what we've discussed today.
Although we've been talking about different tracks, I would like to give a specific shout out to track number 12, Pendulous Skin. That, to those of you who would know me personally and know the characters I tend to play, one specifically, Pendulous Skin has a near and dear place in my heart.
Unfortunately, I know exactly what he's on about.
I have a halfling character with, how you say, geriatric testicle, aka Pendulous Skin.
And on that bombshell, let's systemize.
Systemize.
So, were there any systems that came immediately to mind for you? There's a few. I've got a few, but
we've
this is one.
Whilst we've been discussing it, we have mainly focused on what you call now Fifth Finder. It does lead itself quite well to it. I mean, ultimately, you could make it allows you to have it as part of whatever system you're already running, presumably with it being a fantasy setting in the song. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. I mean, Indiana Jones was contemporary to a certain extent. So, I would have said maybe Fifth Finder. It all depends on what you're aiming for. I think that, not Monster of the Week, Shadow of the Demon Lord.
Dungeon World? Oh,
would play quite well, although you'd have to, seriously sit down and think about the Birchmen and the various different antagonists as part of it. But yeah, any sort of system could work quite well with what you have there, I think.
That was my initial thought as well. That it's very easy to do in D&D. That the system maybe isn't as important as it might be in other things that we've discussed. Though I did think that you might want you've got the very easy D&D way, the kind of it's so easy to slot in. My alternative would be something that prioritizes the struggle to climb the mountain. So something with a lot of survival rules and resource management. So maybe some of the OSR games that are more focused that way, and this is a kind of a wild card pick because I've neither read it nor played it, but Torchbearer, which is based on Burning Wheel, is meant to be very much about the survival and struggle in a dungeon. Is how it's been described in places that I've looked at it. So if that is true, maybe doing a hack to make, because I don't know how tied it is to dungeons as underground layers, but that might be something worth looking at. Because Torchbearer is a fairly well-respected system. It's based on Burning Wheel, I think, and Burning Wheel is on Reddit. Someone called it the greatest game you'll never play, and it's sitting on my shelf. I'm looking at it right now. I think that's a pretty accurate description. And Torchbearer is apparently something much more likely that someone would actually be able to play. But that's kind of I didn't have Allan's indie pick of the week for this one, so I kind of crowbarred that one in because I couldn't think of anything else.
Yeah, it ultimately lends itself quite well, because previously we were concerned about the mortality rate and how actually D&D isn't suited to certain games because you need to feel the cold, icy touch of icy touch of death. Whereas with this one, it seems just like almost a D&D adventure, so you may as well, or Fifth Finder, I should say, not to preclude the Paizo contingent, but it seems just as well. I think it's actually one of the first ones that, if we were to play it, I would be dusting off the player handbook for it, to be honest with you. I think it's probably one of the first, maybe even only ones that would be dedicated D&D fodder there.
So I think we kind of are on the same page there. Blasting through the end after quite a lengthy episode. Don't worry, people.
Final furlong. Well done.
Yeah, you're nearly done.
Bringing it home.
Summarize.
So, our final question is always, is this something we'd actually like to play or run? And this is an odd one, because I was kind of on the fence after my own, despite the fact that it was something I had quite a lot of ideas and thoughts about. I wasn't sure whether I'd want to run or play it, but after the discussion today, I am on the play, probably still on the towards the maybe not, but running it after our discussion, I'm on. It doesn't go in the must play now, but I think it's a maybe one day for me now. I would GM it maybe one day.
I've gone the same way. When I was before I'd actually had this discussion with yourself and maybe voiced some of my thoughts and actually tried to put them into coherent sort of paragraphs as opposed to notes and sort of, you know, mishmash of firing neurons in my brain. I was dead set against it. I was like, nope, don't want to GM it, don't want to play it, don't even talk to me about it. If you manage to get me to play it through subterfuge, fair enough. But if I find out that you're doing it, then I'm going to pick up my ball and go home. But now I've actually discussed it. I actually like the ideas and sort of things. It's almost, I know it sounds terrible, but it's as if I'm enjoying the smell of my own farts. I know what it sounds like, but it's like the more it's come to fruition, the more I thought, actually, that's not so bad. I'll maybe give it a go. But you are right. I'm not in any rush to go and play this. We've had better ideas. There are better games out there, and there's always new material being cranked out. That this would be back shelf or back burner rather. But again, there's nothing saying that it can't be part of or point of interest as part of your campaign. But yeah, back burner to play, probably will unlikely ever GM it.
Yeah, though also as well, one thing I will say is that because you've got little bits, although that it's gone on the maybe one day, you might see a Sasquatch or Birchman or something show up in something. I might. It's something I might come back to kind of cannibalize and take the bits I like and
I say,
shove them somewhere else.
Expect me to pick up my ball and go home in a harumph then in that case. Yeah, well, I've it's only recently, game aside and everything now, only recently talking to the people out there listening that I've only really had some proper sort of listener feedback. We've actually had some sort of actual. I'm having a little moment now. I'm sitting down and I'm talking one-on-one with the viewer here. But yeah, it's nice to know that we've had some feedback and people are actually listening to it and getting something from it. So thank you for listening so far. We've got plenty more lined up. Season 1 is 10 episodes long. We're pretty much halfway through it now. I hope you're enjoying it, really do. I mean, we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't think that you were enjoying it. You know, we're not doing it for ourselves. We're doing it to try and put something out there and create something for you guys to take away. So, yeah, please talk to us, give us feedback. Let us know if there's anything that you would like to try and challenge us with. Or there's always an idea where you thought, I've got my own thoughts on this, for argument's sake, Die Hard. You know, put it in our path. Hear a different set of, a different set of eyes and opinions on it. I hope Allan shares my my love of the fans there, if we can call them that. At least our listeners, anyway.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but you've just triggered a weird memory. If you remember, we were going to do a special Christmas one-shot one year in the Zweihander system.
Right, yeah.
That was going to be based on Die Hard.
That's right. I remember you mentioning that now. That's right. That never came to fruition because of COVID, wasn't it? It was 2019's Christmas, wasn't it? That was because it wouldn't have been this year. It would have been 2020.
No, it wasn't. It was, yeah. I can't remember exactly, but yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe that was the origin of Adventurise. Maybe make it a Die Hard fantasy thing.
We've chewed enough of your year off anyway, but yeah, thanks very much for listening so far, guys. Now I know that there's someone out there listening. I feel like I can address you now more directly. Yeah, thanks very much listening, and cue awesome guitar solo.
So that was our episode on
Blood Mountain.
Hope you got some good ideas out of it. So next time you need something that inspires you, you won't just theorise, but adventurize. And if you do,